So what's been the biggest adjustment for the boys thus far?
I was talking to Chris Kerber about this a couple days ago, and I think a lot of people would expect it to be things like the food or not being able to go places. But I honestly think the biggest adjustment has been how many members of opposing teams they run into and how often they're running into those people. They expected to see guys on the elevators. They expected to see guys in the lobby, but I think they underestimated just how much that would be. And there's guys within the league that they're friends with. There's guys that are former teammates of theirs. But if there's one thing that's clear, it's that these Blues players are not a big fan of that. They're definitely here for one reason. They've left their families. They've made a lot of sacrifices. So they're really here to win. And so seeing the opposing teams is something that's going to be interesting, especially as some of these playoff series heat up.
Now, how often are they seeing these other players and having interactions with them? Because when I spoke with someone down in the NBA bubble, they said their schedules are so staggered, they hardly see any other players. So walk me through what it's like for hockey players right now.
I will say maybe that's something that has been adjusted over the last few days. I don't know if the NHL has changed schedules, but players are separated by floors, and the first few nights, everyone had assigned places that they had to go for dinner. So that was done by team. So they weren't running into people as much there. But just simple things like whenever they're waiting in the lobby for the bus on the very first day, players tend to head down to the lobby about 20 minutes before the bus arrives. Well, we went down there, and the Dallas Stars are about 10 feet away waiting on their bus to arrive. So you have the Blues on one side, the Stars on the other side. So that's kind of the times that they're running into those guys. Testing is something that is staggered, but there's typically two or three teams being tested at a time. So you might run into guys at that point. So things like that.
How strict is the NHL and the Blues organization as far as their players not allowing people in or leaving the bubble?
So to my knowledge, no one has come in or out of the bubble that's not supposed to be. Everyone really has been following the rules. There are masks everywhere that there are supposed to be masks, which is just about everywhere other than if you're eating or if you're playing, more or less. So it seems like everyone's really been following the rules. I think that no one really wants to sacrifice ruining this thing because, as I said, they know that they've made a huge sacrifice by being here and they don't want this to be for nothing.
So what about the music sessions that we were expecting from the Blues? Are they all getting together, playing music, and trying to kill some of that time together?
I don't know that they've had their music sessions yet. I think that's something that's definitely going to come. I think that the first few days have kind of just been an adjustment period to figure out what they can do to pass time. They do have a player lounge that's players only. The coaches aren't allowed to be up there. No one's allowed to be there. So that's kind of where they go to bond. I know there's been some video games being played outside. You can play cornhole, you can play basketball and things like that. Again, I do expect things to loosen up a little bit just as far as what you're able to do, because for the first 5 days, a lot of things were closed. The pool was closed. You only could go to specific places for dinner. The hotel gym was closed, which that doesn't really affect the players, but that's just an example of things that were closed. And as of yesterday, all of those things opened up. So I think now guys will be able to be a little bit more creative and kind of try to figure out what they want their daily routine to be.
Exactly. Would you say that you've been around the boys for quite some time in their Stanley Cup run last year? Would you say something like this would help they would be able to benefit from, as it would bring them closer when they're playing in such competitive and tough games?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I mean, I think that this is a team, as you saw last year, like they're different. You hear teams talk about being tight knit, but these guys are a little bit more tight knit than what you would normally expect. They have each other's back, and most importantly, they enjoy spending time together. I think that's something that we'll see a lot of, even though the guys are going to have their freedom to go wherever they want for dinners and things like that. I think you're going to see a lot of guys stay together, choosing to keep bonding and things like that.
Now, I saw Ryan O'Reilly took the team out to the Chop House last night. How do things like that just bring this team even closer and make their chances of winning the cup, that much higher?
Right. I've been around for a couple of the team dinners, and from what I can tell, it looks like maybe a different guy is buying each night. And so that is one of those things, like you said, that just shows, they have each other's back. They want to do things for each other. And I do think that those things are big because everyone's away from their family. Everyone is away from everything. And so the bond that they have together is really their only sense of normalcy. And what they do on the ice is their only sense of normalcy. So honestly, although no one wants to be away from their family, no one wants to be away from their kids or their personal life and everything like that. I absolutely think that for a team like this who already gets along, who's already so tight-knit, I think going through this somewhat challenging time together is going to be huge.
Okay, and a couple final questions that I have for you. You saw the guys after the game. What we saw on television, may not be what you see at practice every single day. What's their mentality like? How were they after that game? And what do you feel like needs to happen for the guys before they take on the Avalanche tomorrow night?
I think that game was kind of just an adjustment more than anything. Obviously, they aren't happy to lose a game, especially against the Blackhawks. What I will say is that the Blackhawks needed that game a little bit more, because if it weren't for this format, they might not have ended up in the playoffs. And so they kind of had to hit the ground running for their own mentality and their own confidence. The Blues weren't necessarily in that boat. However, I will say, moving forward, as soon as that game ended, they had Thursday off. And then yesterday's practice was a pretty intense practice. And I think the general consensus with all the guys is that these round robin games are super important. And they're not necessarily important because they want to be the number one seed, because home ice advantage isn't going to play a huge factor in all of this. But, you want to be going into playoffs on a roll. You want to have that momentum. And so I think that they're taking this week and these next round robin games really, really seriously, just to be able to get into that shape, both physically and mentally.
And final question that I have for your experience, for being around the group, are they more focused there than they possibly would have been here, or do you sense the same type of focus?
I think that this is a team that's extremely consistent. I think that last year, whenever you saw that run that they had, that was part of the reason they were so successful, because they never got too high and they never got too low. And I will say, as of now, I would say I'm seeing the same characteristics, the same mood, the same level of relaxation, all of that, at least when it comes to being at the rink, whether that's at practice or before a game or anything like that. So right now, I would honestly say I think that they're pretty consistent. I think that's going to be easier to tell whenever we get to tomorrow and I'm seeing how they prepare for a game that does actually mean something rather than just an exhibition game.
So your message to Blues fans, don't worry, everything will be okay.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think there's no reason to not be completely confident in this team and what they can do, because like I said, they don't get too high and they don't get too low. So if you're afraid that they're, going to be hung up over that loss to Chicago, that is absolutely not the case.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk